Fashion came for me, and just thinking I was a complete failure for having a go at this venture and what have I kind of done. Didn't happen. Fell into a bit of a slump, as we all do, you know, like state of depression, you could call it, at that age. And then, was on the board of ROKSANDA, and then ROKSANDA asked me to take over as her CEO. So then did that. Many ethnic minorities, and particularly South Asian communities, have ever considered it as any creative sector as a viable career avenue.
And we're live. Today we have with us Jamie Gill, who's the luxury and fashion executive and the founder of The Outsider's Perspective. If you're joining us for the first time, we're the Bay HQ, and we're all about helping British Asians succeed. So Jamie, you've now had a storied career and many highlights along the way, but you all started from somewhere, right? So when you were a kid, what was the dream? What was the ambition?
Oh gosh, the dream. I always wanted to do something creative. I think deep down, I would love to have been a fashion designer. I think that's what I really would have loved to do, but didn't think that was viable as a kid. I knew quite early I was gay. Like, I knew from 8 years old, I knew I was gay, and I clocked on quite early that if I say I want to be a fashion designer, my parents are going to clock on, and this is going to come out. And I was concealing it. And then I found architecture, to be an architect, would be a way of being a professional, but also feeding my creative flair.
You said you knew that from such a young age. But obviously, I guess it's social pressures. You're worried about what your family are going to think, that you didn't mention it for a long time. And when you went into architecture, were you happy at that point, or were you still thinking, I really wish I went into fashion, I'm just doing this as a trade-off? What were your thoughts then?
I think I tricked myself, concealing your sexual identity for such a long time, knowing from an early age, and I didn't come out till I was like 22, 23. And I thought architecture was a great way of being a chartered professional, and I'll get to be creative. But and I think tricked myself through my teenage years that I want to do this. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the education. I think studying architecture is just one of the best degrees you can possibly do. You're thinking about, art, history, physics, but also socioeconomics. What's the impact of a building, and how does it touch, society's heart? Is really profound. But I think, deep down, fashion was really where the calling was, where I wanted to be.
So, after university, you worked in architecture for a bit, right? But then you moved around. You didn't go straight into fashion. Where did you go next?
Yeah, so I graduated in the thick of the recession, really, and it was just really, really hard to get a job. I was paid nothing, working at a number of different architecture practices, hopping around, believing that I would find the joy that I was looking for and fulfillment in that career at a different firm, at a different firm. Didn't happen. And fell into a bit of a slump, as we all do, like state of depression, you could call it, at that age. And then I was living in a house share in London. I'd moved to London, and my friend there was working at Deloitte, and he was like, "You're not enjoying this. What about Deloitte? And here's an amazing career avenue here. You can get you can become a chartered accountant, do your ACA, and so many of the FTSE 100 CEOs are ACA trained. I think half of them are ACA trained. It's like it will propel you elsewhere." So took his advice, and had to get my head from being a creative into the world of accounting, and then moved into Deloitte. Did 5 years there in various different kind of service lines and sectors, and then again. Fashion came for me in a way. I was just seeing again how the economy at that time, as it is now, was super struggling, and how well true luxury always does in turbulent times. Back then and now, Chanel, LVMH brands were increasing their prices significantly beyond inflation, with still being able to manage demand, because demand's still there, and you're like, people are really struggling financially, but your Chanel bag is now £9,000 when it was once £2,500 in 6 years. It's kind of accelerated at such a rate that I was just fascinated on the business of what was happening in fashion and luxury, and I was like, this feels where my calling's coming.
And for people who aren't familiar with that as well, what is the reason behind that? Why can Chanel keep raising their prices?
I think it's that age-old scenario when we enter, turbulent times economically, and whether we're on the cusp of recession or enter into recession sooner enough. The world's wealth is still protected at this time, and I think the consideration on where you want to deploy funds or invest in as high net worth or ultra high net worth, or even if you're not, even if you're still on the aspirational trajectory of a brand, of a brand life cycle, and where you buy into it, you feel confident to put your money into something that's a heritage brand. And I think that's where it works. That's where Chanel and your Dior and your Hermes and your Louis Vuitton, you feel safe. If you're going to spend £2,000 on a bag, or £5,000 now on a bag, you will do it at one of those brands because it's got a resale value. It's got an investment piece there. This is what we're seeing with fine jewelry and watches and a Rolex right now. You'll feel confident to put your money in there versus something that's more fashion and something that's more seasonal or trend-led.
And you know when you made the transition to fashion, right? So by then you'd come out, right? And how much of that played into your desire, like of now knowing, okay, so now that doesn't factor into it, I can now go into fashion? Or how is that like final switch made? Like now is the time.
So funny enough, like being in architecture and being, there's loads of individuals from the LGBT community working in architecture for sure. It's just not an industry that I don't think it even does now in 2023 embraces the conversation really around representation and diversity. Everyone they're there, you're siloed and just getting on with work, and you're working every hour under the sun as an architect, bless them. But when I joined Deloitte, and this was like 2010, I say this story all the time, I'm such an advocate for the firm. I had the best time of my life there, made some of my best friends there. I just saw LGBTQ partners leading divisions, leading international divisions at the firm. And I was like, he's gay, he's married, he's got kids. The firm's embracing this conversation around diversity. They understand that their client portfolio is completely diverse. And what are they selling versus the other professional services firm? Just their people, their culture. They need to reflect that. They need to understand that. Why am I so scared? And Deloitte made me come out. Like I was felt confident that here I can be who I am. So I think that was that bit coming over. And I think then, after Deloitte, had this crazy idea that I'll set up my own business, set up my own brand and wanted to launch an Indian bridal luxury brand and move to India with a friend and lived in Mumbai for a year and thinking that I was going to be, literally create the next Sabyasachi at that time.
How planned out was that? Like, were you thinking about the Indian fashion brand for like a long time? Or was it. I'm going to go for this.
It was me reaching that corporate peak, being 5 years at Deloitte. I was only a manager grade at that time, but I was just living that corporate life, flying business class, you were staying in 5-star hotels and you were enjoying all that life, but was so unfulfilled. I was like, I don't care about these clients' assets. That if they just want an international firm to give them their stamp of approval on this valuation report or whatever, that this is great. And I'm like, there's no add value here. They're going to do really well with the caliber of clients that international professional services firms work. What's the add value here? I feel so unfulfilled at that point. And I was like, I want to do something creative, but I found that my contribution that I want to give to the creative space is the business side. It was like, I don't want to be now anymore as I've grown and evolved and did my ACA and was working with a number of leading clients at Deloitte, that I was like, I'm not going to be a designer anymore, but there's a big opportunity to contribute to the evolution and development of creative business and particularly fashion. So that was doing that real life MBA. I look back on it as like where I learned a hell of a lot trying to set something up on my own.
And why was it India you decided to go to rather than trying to set up here?
I just thought there was an opportunity. I mean, there's still an opportunity. Like I still think with that Indian bridal market is insane, especially at high net worth, ultra high net worth. You can argue they're few and far between, but how that trickles down, when it's coming to that spend still. And yes, that's evolved, I think, with British Asians and British South Asians as well, that we're not putting that level of investment into weddings as they once did. But there's still a number of, a significant audience, with India being the largest population in the world right now, over China, that it was always the wedding was the second biggest investment for the family after the family home. Mm-hmm. So in that, you were seeing the bridal party, how many outfits the bride would need for each event. So would her mum, so would her sisters, so would the cousins, so would the aunties, and then the gifting. It was quite significant.
And once you got out there, right, how was the actual process of setting up the business?
So my friend was the designer. He was the creative on this, and but for me, it was really interesting to go meet the factories. So it was sketched and designed and then source and sample and produce, and then have a collection that we would start lobbying around, with potential clients and speaking to the media out there and sponsors, etc., and figuring it going. We raised some funds, but needed a hell of a lot more money actually to get it going back then, which then brought me back to London. And then I joined a family office venture capital fund, which was my bridge into VC, that was looking to invest particularly in fashion and luxury. So I was kind of had this career that was building of being trained as a creative, but then having a business head and then having experience of actually going through that life cycle as what's needed, particularly for a fashion and luxury startup brand, and then bringing that to family office to now actually go and originate and deploy funds with a view to scale and sell on to people.
So when you were younger, you had the pressures of family about your career decisions, right? And how did it feel when you went to India and maybe it didn't quite work how you wanted it to? Did you feel a lot of pressure from maybe not just your family, even your friends and people around you, about you making this big step from the corporate world, Deloitte, that everybody knows, the professional services, to go and building your own company in India and not quite working out? How was that like conversation in your own head?
Oh my gosh, that was probably one of the worst times of my life. When you think about it like that, you tell the story, but you look back where your head was at coming back end of 2015 it was. So I'd done a year in there, had all this hopes and dreams, like naivety more than anything, that this was going to blow up and I was going to be an overnight success and this brand would be, insane. So naive at the time, but coming back with no money, in debt, physically not in a great state. I'd lost so much of my hair. It was insane. And just thinking I was a complete failure for having a go at this venture and what have I kind of done? And it was a really, really low point. I'd actually fell in love for the first time ever as well. As soon as I moved to India, I fell in love with a guy for that year, and we had a great time together. And then that was over because I was like, this isn't going to work anymore. So then back at my parents with debt and nothing, and in not a great state. So no, I'm not going to lie. There's a year of rebuilding myself, I think, after that, and then going into the family office, and it's not my family office, a family office, and then getting into, originating in London, looking at deals, it really propelled me into the epicenter of British fashion, really, and was working back then as just a kind of, loose advisor, giving mentorship to the British Fashion Council, to the designers early on. But it was starting to really start understanding and looking at so many businesses as they were coming for funding to us, where the holes were, and building an expertise in it.
Yeah, and like with that transition as well, so you said you had a year building yourself back up again. Do you feel like the work you're doing with fashion and helping like those startup fashion companies to excel, was that part of what got you back, or how did you get yourself back on your feet to start believing in yourself again? Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I think it was belief. I mean, I had an amazing life coach, still have an amazing life coach, who's a great therapist, who really just really needed to understand that I am detached from what I'm, that my failures, however you want to call them, aren't me, as much as my successes aren't me as well. That's not how we define ourselves. And we're putting too much value on even if it is putting value on material as possessions, or putting a value on status, or whatever those things are, putting your self-value on others was the detriment, good or bad, of where that's happening. And it was just learning, to understand the basics of like what everyone talks about loving yourself, and about, and understanding you have value and you have self-worth that isn't attributed to, external decisions that you've made that haven't worked out the way you wanted to, and your expectations as well. And so it's just a lot of that narrative, and then learning to live and love and enjoy life again. And then things start happening again, and getting back in that positive mindset, accelerated with the fund, became investment director, we'd invested in ROKSANDA, which some people in fashion would know who ROKSANDA is one of our prized assets for British fashion after Burberry and McQueen and Stella McCartney. That next tier down of an internationally emerged designer is ROKSANDA, Erdem, Simone Rocha, that folio of brands. And then was on the board of ROKSANDA, and then ROKSANDA asked me to take over as her CEO. So then did that for 5 years, which was the next journey, and it was good.
How did that experience of picking companies to invest in, helping those portfolio companies, then help you become the CEO of ROKSANDA? Like, what skills did you learn from that VC space, that VC family office time?
I think that what was interesting for that is having the past experience that I've had of, being creatively trained, as I said, and then having this business head, and then having a go at a startup myself, then being in VC, particularly with origination and due diligence. You're looking at so many brands that are looking for fundraising. Some big brands were coming to family office, for a significant check. And you're in, once you've got access access to the data room of a brand, you can see everything. You know, what is this? What's happened with this business? You're interviewing management. You're doing your own due diligence. You're sense checking that in industry. You have a calling card to go and speak to editors and in industry figureheads to understand what the perception is of brands. And you just start learning. I think over that time, I really just started to learn what's ROI in investment decisions in brand. So what was working for marketing? What worked then for digital marketing? It's all evolved now, obviously. There was a period where you could spend X amount on social and you would be getting 4 times return or whatever. That was a proven, ROI in digital marketing. And you were just learning how this worked. Like, how do you build strong brand equity? What stands the test of time? How do you start to merchandise? I've realized that I had quite a strong merchandising skill set, being interested in fashion, having, an interest in the space and learning what was, what are people wearing, and marrying that with data and what's performing and what's selling through, and understanding who the consumer is and what she wants to wear and how she wants to wear it and what her lifestyle is. That's what merchandising is. It's like, okay, we're putting this crazy, balloon dress in every fabric and every color on the runway. It's £10,000, but how do we create the commercial dilution of that that's actually going to perform, that we're going to put units behind?
And when you were at ROKSANDA as well, as a CEO, how did you create that brand value? How did you create the perception of the luxury to make sure that you were getting the customers in and getting people to believe in your brand?
Yeah, I think what was interesting with ROKSANDA was she's a very good friend of mine, one of my close friends now still as well. And I think we developed that real strong relationship that was harmonious, that I really understood. It's her, she founded this. So it was really understanding her creative direction and what she wanted for her brand, and me being able to be the commercial facilitator of that would give it value and would make it profitable, and all of those things. A lot of SME fashion brands aren't profitable, and that's it. We've got a negative PR in that as an industry, that it doesn't work. It can work, it can work. There's just lack of specialized expertise in scalability and infrastructure needed, but it is there. And I think we showcase that with ROKSANDA. It's a profitable business. We grew its gross profit margin significantly, grew its distribution, did a number of key collaborations, with the likes of Lululemon and Fila and Barber and Max Mara, and expanding into worlds, close to the brand, just expanding its reach, but also just being this headliner, I feel, for London Fashion Week. We would put the most beautiful artistic show at the new pavilion that would be built at the Serpentine Gallery, and Anna Wintour would be there, every September watching the ROKSANDA show, with Edward Enninful from British Vogue and everybody who was influential in fashion, and just really understanding and reacting to what our brand partners, our wholesale brand partners from Harrods and Selfridges and everyone needed, really. And I think I really had to get in there with marketing and finance and everyone, and really understand what each pillar of the business needed and be able to deliver that with the team.
So you mentioned earlier when you were at Deloitte, you had this feeling of being unfulfilled, right? When you were running ROKSANDA, how did you feel then? What was the...
I reached it. I was like, had finally, I think that early Deloitte stages were leading to leaving. I knew that I was like, fashion, business of fashion is where I want to be. CEO is where I want to be. I think that's where I want to be. That's where I've got, and I think you never know what you really want to do until you're going to do it anyway. Like you can think you want to do something, and your personal development evolves, your experiences evolve, your network evolves, and your expectations change, and you evolve. So that's what I always thought I wanted to do. And for a long time, I was really, really content and fulfilled with ROKSANDA. I think it was just this itch and yearning still of it wasn't I don't want to say it's my name. It's not so much fussed about my name. The outsider's perspective isn't my name, but it was about having control, about having to implement what youth believe is best, and not being prohibited, I think, by brand framework or, just corporate governance, which everyone has when you're in a kind of a leadership role. So I just think this urge to be free, really. And fundamentally at the same time, ROKSANDA worked for me, and I'm still, have shares in the business and sit on the board, but it's because it was art. And it had a point of view of society, and it's about empowerment of women, and it's about architecture, and it's art, and it's color, and you don't need to be, sexy to be empowered. And there's so many things that resonated with what it did. But what I think I was lacking still was bigger impact, was actual, not just, I don't want to call it social impact, I mean impact. And I think impact and profitability, I think it's purpose and profitability. I don't think it's like they need to be mutually exclusive. I think I wanted both. I was like, I want purpose impact, but that's what I want to be paid for doing as well. I've still got a mortgage, I've still got to live. So, and I think that's what I was missing there.
You're at the same time, you're on the British Fashion Council. We're laughing at what I said earlier. I'll leave this in because I can't seem to say it properly. British Fashion Council.
Yes.
So you're doing that all of the time alongside, right?
No, so I was just kind of mentoring with some of the designers then, but ultimately on the back of Black Lives Matter, June 2020, I was asked to join the board of the British Fashion Council. To ultimately to be transparent, diversify, their board with perspective, being LGBTQ and being a person of color. It was needed. And and my area at that time wasn't representation. And I think even through my career, it's not like it's always the brown guy or the black person that's got to pick up D&I. And I think, and it does happen because, we are, we have that lived experience and it's not yet a profession. There isn't yet clear policy on it, so, but I think, and my area of focus at the BFC wasn't representation. Only last year, June 2022, I've now taken over with D&I and representation being my focus as well.
How have you enjoyed that role? Because obviously the British Fashion Council is like very senior, like it's well known across the world, like everyone had so much impact. How did it feel, I guess, once you also mentioned it beforehand, but to be asked to join that board and to have that kind of an impact, how did that kind of feel as your own career progression? Yeah,
no, it was great. It was great because I was always, working at Deloitte, I've admired the British Fashion Council, anybody who understands, who was part of the industry, we know CFDA in America and the British Fashion Council here in the UK, we are the institution. We have a responsibility to the industry about putting, creative talent on a world stage. And we do London Fashion. We are behind London Fashion Week, and we do the Fashion Awards, which is the Fashion Awards for me, London's most glamorous moment that we have. That's the UK's equivalent to the Oscars. But what it's really doing is nurturing, developing, and really, propelling creative designers onto the next platform. So I've always, seen everybody who's birthed out of that. And ROKSANDA is, through the new gen program that we have, and now internationally established designer. So no, it meant a lot. And really enjoying my work there. Love the team there. It's a small team, believe it or not, but has an incredible impact.
Yeah, could you tell us a bit more about some of the impacts? So since you've been there, what are some of the positives that have come out of that? Yeah,
so I think, we have only just this recently, we've been working as a board. So there was a number of board members who were brought on when I joined and further now. So we've got a strong executive board there as well. The British Fashion Council strategy, the focus is about empowering, creative talent on the world stage and giving it, the platform and the infrastructure needed to deliver on that. It's a convener. I think it has an expectation in industry that it's the answer. This is the problem. We've got to go to the BFC and they've got to kind of resolve everything for us. And that's it's hard to, we've got a number of hundreds of designers that are part of the network and other organizations and businesses as well who feed into the British Fashion Council ecosystem. But what I'm really proud of is we've been, looking at understanding and listening around representation and D&I over the last year since I've been chair of the committee. Only just, Monday, the 21st of August, we have launched the Fashion DEI Census. So the Fashion DEI Census is a census across the British fashion industry for us to really understand in data what are the demographics that make up our industry. What is it? What's the gender cut? What's the LGBTQ plus cut? And disability and ethnicity, and really understand where we are. So on the back of it, we can produce best practice strategy and policy for businesses and organizations moving forward to create a truly inclusive workforce. And that's being done with the outsider's perspective.
And it's as you said as well, because the data side is so important, because if you can't measure it, it's very difficult to tell what impact you're making, and it's really hard.
Yeah.
But you mentioned there as well the outsider's perspective. Tell us more about that. So where did that idea come from? What does it do? What's the mission behind it?
Yeah. It's I feel like we're unknown outside of industry, and to be fair, I would love our visibility to be bigger in industry for sure. So the outsider's perspective, again, birthed out of me sitting on the board and being, a kind of strategic advisor now in fashion and luxury. I work with a number of kind of organizations who want to gain access to fashion and luxury and have a macro view of industry. And just saw on the back of Black Lives Matter how many organizations set up a D&I steering committee, sent out a press release and hired a D&I leader. We saw it across all industries as well. And that was their answer to addressing diversity and inclusion. But 3 years on, what's changed? What's happened? We've seen an evolution somewhat in marketing and visual representation that was always there. You wouldn't really rarely see any brand, I think, even outside of fashion, not do an ad campaign that looked inclusive, even 10 years ago. So yeah, that's propelled somewhat more. But workforce statistics, inclusion hasn't moved on. Executive boards are still, majority white. You still have in luxury, particularly the white middle class, middle age, straight CEO still, and not evolving this conversation. And I suppose what the outsiders and simultaneously in fashion and luxury, it's unclear, how do you get to a leadership role? What are the career avenues to actually build a career in the business of fashion and luxury? It's not obvious. You know what's you know how to do it in other industries. You go and earn your stripes at a Big Four or Magic Circle, and you take it into industry, and you can kind of propel your career. But fashion and luxury, it's not clear yet. As in terms of the creative sector, fashion's the biggest employer and the biggest contributor to GDP. We're bigger than automobile, so it's a significant industry, and I don't think it's taken as seriously as a business as it actually is. So, and then we're struggling with representation, and we don't know where to get good talent from. So that's what the outsider's perspective does. It marries both. It's equally a representation initiative as well as it is a talent initiative. So we provide, it's a not-for-profit, and we provide access to all of those talented people of color who have really wanted to work in the business of fashion and luxury. And you've got to demonstrate that to us. You've got to say that I really wanted to be in here, and I've tried to gain access. And what we're looking for is people who are outside of industry, hence the name, and minimum 4 or 5 years experience in industry. And we're just about providing access when HR will always not allow you to career pivot because you don't have industry experience. And what we'll say is we'll train you up and teach you the nuances of what is needed to actually pivot your career into an akin business vertical in the industry, and all on the operational, commercial and marketing side.
So obviously what you mentioned as well, like there's just not enough South Asians especially in Britain in particular, in the fashion industry. And we're talking about how we know so many people who love fashion, but they never consider actually working in the area.
Yeah.
And like, why is that? What's going on there?
I think it's twofold, really. I think it's I don't think many ethnic minorities, and particularly South Asian communities, have ever considered it as any creative sector as a viable career avenue. Not how you're going to make money being a designer, but what I'm saying, this is not about being a designer. This is actually about being a finance director, but do it at Chanel, or do it at a brand that you really want to, you enjoy, that you want to contribute to. I think there's an abundance of opportunity in the commercial, operational and marketing side of the business of fashion and luxury. Abundance of opportunity to kind of, bring your contribution and to still build, a really substantial, lucrative career, for a better word, for it, and really enjoy it rather than doing something that seems cumbersome or administrative too much. So I think, and I just don't think it's clear. I don't think it's clear what the opportunities are. I think there's pressure naturally from most South Asian families that you've got to go and do something safe and secure. Parents didn't fight and grandparents didn't fight so hard. But
even if you think about like LVMH, all these kind of companies, they're huge.
Yeah.
So they're safe. Like, it's not like those companies are going to go, but touch wood, right? But it's like, they're not small companies, right?
100%,
they're blue chip, right?
100%. Yeah. And look at LVMH. I mean, look who, it always fluctuate who's our wealthiest man in the world. But, Bernard Arnault was 2 months ago was the wealthiest man in the world over Elon Musk or anybody else from LVMH, from the conglomerate of all of the leading fashion luxury brands. It's significant business, and it's doing, it's highly profitable and doing really well. And I know, from the group, there's a number of opportunities, there. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what our metric is as a not-for-profit. How can we tangibly diversify the fashion industry, and finding that talent, and particularly, from a South Asian slant, me being South Asian and having that natural community who kind of come to me, who apply for the program as well. It's open to all people of color. But, it's working. Our model works. We find strong candidates. We find candidates who've got a contribution to give to the industry that we could benefit from. If you've been working in marketing, digital marketing at Amazon, yeah, great. We could actually probably do with you at Burberry. But what's hard is to actually apply directly to the brand because you don't have industry experience, so you're vetoed when you apply directly. But if you're an outsider's perspective candidate, you've somewhat got an ACE card, and we have the relationships with the brand partners, and Burberry and Alexander McQueen and Chanel and Lululemon and Victoria Beckham are all our brand partners.
So really enjoyed chatting with you today. We have to move on to quick fire questions now.
Okay.
First quick fire question is, who are 3 appreciations that you think are doing incredibly well that you'd love to shout out for the audience to?
Imran Ahmed, founder of the business of fashion. Imran was such a key figurehead for me whilst I was at Deloitte. Business of Fashion was growing as this amazing media platform. And I was like, if he's there and he's doing this, I can be there too. And he was such an inspiration for me. And Business of Fashion is the leading platform now around, media in the business of fashion. So definitely Imran for sure. And then I would say, who else is Gurinder Chadha? I'd have to say, like, again, watching her from Bend It Like Beckham being one of my favorite films as a kid and looking at her, and I see her as, as a film director, as an entrepreneur, like what she's contributed to, to film and to British film, and her perspective of bringing us into the spotlight on that. Oh my God, amazing. And I'd love to meet her. Still haven't met her, but it's such an inspiration for sure. And then someone who I've met recently, who I love as well, who I think deserves the shout out, is Rav Matharu, who set up Cloth Surgeon. And Cloth Surgeon is luxury, bespoke streetwear and tailoring that's on Savile Row. Like, he's bringing this streetwear edge to luxury tailoring on Savile Row with an edge. And I think it's absolutely incredible. I've never seen anything like it. And I was like, and spans and, such a spectrum of audience there. So I think, that would be my three.
So next one is, if people listening right now want to reach out to you or reach out to Founders Perspective, where should they go to? What should they reach out about? www.theoutsidersperspective.org. And you can click online. Got an amazing team we have at The Outsiders Perspective, a growing organisation working with a number of brands. And yes, we have which are live now, we are looking for candidates who want to work in the business of fashion and luxury. I've always dreamt of it, to apply now to our cohort 3 of applications, which are live till the end of September. And is there any way the audience could help you maybe, or help with the Outsider's Perspective?
What can they do for the Outsider's Perspective? I think, what would be interesting, and I'd love to just leave this with everyone, is we've got a real challenge. Industries have all got a challenge around representation. The Outsider's Perspective is lobbying the business case for an organisation needs to be reflective of its growth in consumer demographics and growth and consumer fundamentally, to understand them by having, representatives, advocates for that customer base in-house. We're talking about it from a business case, and that resonates. It's like, how do we understand, the Indian market without having Indians in business and at a leadership role? It kind of somewhat resonates. It is obviously social purpose. It is impact. There's obviously a conversation for this being fair and what's equality, but it's working from actually delivering on what that impact is. McKinsey's data shows that those businesses that have high ethnic diversity at leadership level are 36% more financially profitable than those that are not. But I think the ask to the audience is, why are you buying from a brand that doesn't represent you? Like, why are you dreaming up and saving and you keep buying from brands that represent you in ad campaigns and, happily take all of your money and understand, as a minority community, that you are a target consumer, and they happily take your money, but you're not allowed in HQ. You're not allowed in the business. You're not allowed at Porsche's business. You're not allowed at Mercedes-Benz business. There's none. Where's the representation at executive level, at leadership level in majority of these organizations? We're changing it from a fashion and luxury perspective, but from a mainstream perspective, why are you putting your money into something that doesn't include you, that doesn't allow you? But you could really help lobby that, and demand, there could be a social revolution on this. We can see it with Gen Z. Gen Z want authenticity, want transparency from brands, and will boycott brands that don't reflect them. And that's not just the underrepresented communities. The minorities are boycotting them. They're boycotting them in a collective. You don't represent us. That's not just, everyone who's from a minority boycotting us. No, we're not buying from you because we're not allowed in your organization. Demand transparency and move to a brand who does represent you.
So thank you again so much for coming on. Any final words to the audience?
No. I think we covered quite a lot, but that would be my ask for people, just to think about that. Just question where you're putting your spending power, and a movement in this could really put pressure, I think, on organizations to actually take this conversation seriously, because that's when it hurts, when they start realizing there's a risk there that we're going to lose money.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It means a huge amount to us, and we don't think you realise how important you are, because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you leave us a 5-star review, it makes a world of difference. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here, to inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians, if you do those things, you can help us achieve that mission, and you can help us make a bigger impact. And by doing that, it means we can get bigger guests, we can host more events, we can do more for the community. So you can play a huge part. So thank you so much for supporting us.